Hello, everybody. Today is day 316, and we're reading from Matthew 23 and Luke 20 and 21. Today, Jesus devotes a lot of time exposing the corruption of the religious leaders and the religious order. We might be inclined to celebrate that Jesus finally is getting after them and uncovering all of this wickedness, because they've certainly been after Jesus. But many of the things actually we ought to view cautiously, because they could in many ways affect us, impacting us, because these issues that the religious leaders struggled with are certainly areas of which the enemy will be tempting us. Deception, power, self-righteousness. We all know the temptation that these things have. And in fact, the longer you and I have been Christian, the more apt we are to become subject to these struggles and these temptations. Jesus recognizes the office of the religious leaders, and he even says, do what they tell you to do. But he just makes a distinction here. Don't do what they do. He makes accusations. They're founded, and this is what he says. He said they say and they don't do. They place heavy burdens on people, but they refuse to bear those burdens themselves. All they do in their religious duties and activity is that they can be seen of others, that others would applaud them and look up to them, and they like all that attention. They love the best seats. They like titles and recognition. And he calls them some very harsh and specific names like hypocrites. It's an interesting term because it actually represented those in that day that were in plays and who acted. So actually it was actors. And so when we hear the word hypocrite, he was referring to them as just simply actors, just pretending. He says that he accuses them of being a hindrance for other people finding their way to God. He says you don't enter in, and you trip up those who even are pursuing or seeking a relationship with God. You make long prayers, mainly because they're a pretense. You simply are doing it to persuade and convince that you are others that you are this righteous and holy person. And then he says this: they will receive the greater condemnation. That certainly demonstrates the fact there are degrees of punishment, even as there are degrees of rewards. Jesus often used this phrase, greater condemnation. They make, he says to that, these religious leaders make their converts 2 times the son of hell. In other words, this doesn't just affect them, but it's contagious, and it begins to transform and impact the lives of those who are even making a pursuit for God. He identifies their influence and their corruption, and we understand that a little leaven leavens the whole loaf, that he calls them blind guides, fools. He expresses and identifies the corruption of the heart. And that's a warning, because this is something that can get in on the inside of us. That's why he especially talks about the fact that you clean the outside, you make the outside look really good, but it's like whitewashed tombs. Now, we think of whitewash as that which is a temporary cover. It doesn't really change what is beneath there. And in fact, we used to whitewash our barns inside because it would give a look of brightness and cleanness. But he's talking about whitewashing the tombs, but yet they're really dead men. He says you're unclean. Your outside appears righteous, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. So when he calls them serpents and brood of vipers, he's doing so because of that trickle down influence, that it's corruption. It does more than affect them, but that it begins to affect anybody that comes in contact with them. And then he says, how are you going to escape the greater condemnation? Jesus then spends significant time outlining and warning of future coming events. Now, this always gets our attention. We'll be discussing this even more in tomorrow's reading. But in this account in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is showing them as he's talking, they're pointing out all the beautiful buildings and it's spectacular when they look at the temple and its glory. And so Jesus is reminding them of coming events and says to them, listen, Jerusalem is going to be destroyed and all these buildings you see are going to come crashing down, and the Jews are going to be scattered. You're going to be surrounded by your enemies. We know that this actually happened as Jesus prophesies of this in 70 AD. He addresses then transitioning to the events of the end of the age. Even as Jerusalem is destroyed, he speaks about signs and events, wars and earthquakes and famines and pestilence and fearful sights. He says even this is only the beginning of sorrows, like labor pains. And then he speaks about this continual that like a woman in labor, that they'll come closer to the contractions will come closer together and become more intense until finally it will be the end. And in fact, he says there'll be such fearful worldwide calamity that people's hearts will begin failing them. Fear, terror will become so pronounced. He warns that Christians are going to be persecuted. They're going to be put in prison. There are going to be divisions in families, even family members betraying family members because of loyalty or allegiance to Jesus that we hated. There's going to be death as a result of it. So all of it, as we oftentimes look forward to the coming of Christ, I understand, though, this is speaking especially to that period after the rapture, during the 7-year tribulation that leads up just prior to Christ returning to set up an earthly kingdom. Now, then Jesus, the Bible tells us here, Jesus said he's going to come, and he's going to come with power, and he's going to come with great glory. He's going to come on the cloud. And Matthew describes that everybody's going to see that when it transpires. It won't be a secret thing. Then we have this warning that Jesus gives. Watch, that you need to be on guard. You need to be alert. Take heed. No doubt because of this seduction, the seducing spirit. It's going to be a snare, he talks about it. Even as he uses the Pharisees as kind of a backdrop of the danger of that spirit getting hold of it. And then he's talking about the spirit of the age and the spirit of the hour. And we're giving a strong warning about it, that take heed, because this spirit of age could indeed disqualify us and lead us until we're seduced by that spirit, and so then the whole emphasis here is to watch. Therefore, we may not know all the details, we may not understand all the specifics, but one thing we can know: we need to be ready, watching for the coming of Christ, being alert to the signs, but being ready for the return of Christ.